And this talk kind of dovetails after Dr. Lahad's talk. So if we're going to go as an overview, we're going to go over the anatomy, the biomechanics, and the clinical examination. If we start with the medial side of the knee, MCL injuries are common, but injury to the deep MCL and the posterior medial corner are likely more common than previously appreciated. And these cause significant laxity with regards to rotational injuries. If we think about the anatomy of the posterior of the MCL, there's the superficial MCL, the deep MCL, and the posterior oblique, which makes up the posterior medial corner. And really the deep MCL, there's more data coming out about the deep MCL that is of its contributions to rotational instability and stability. So as we know, the superficial MCL is the primary stabilizer to valgus at 30 degrees of flexion. It's a secondary stabilizer to internal rotation and full extension, and also external rotation at 30 degrees of flexion and 90 degrees of flexion. If we look at more at the deep MCL though, there's the meniscofemoral and meniscotibial components of this. And really the work done by Dr. Amos's lab in the UK has shown that there's a big contribution to external rotation with the deep MCL. And then really the orientation of the deep MCL is more oblique. And in the setting of a ACL deficient knee, this comes and really resists external rotation. And when they looked at this, comparing this to the posterior oblique ligament and the posterior medial corner, really it's your deep MCL that really contributes to external rotation after an ACL deficiency. And when they compared this to the Laprade standard reconstruction, adding a third bundle of the deep MCL and this oblique orientation decreased the external rotation. The posterior oblique didn't do anything for external rotation. And so really when we think about the deep MCL, it's really contributing to axial stability in regard to axial rotation. And it's really the deep MCL in the setting of an ACL that contributes to anterior medial rotatory instability, not really the posterior oblique. If we look at the posterior oblique ligament, the central arm is really an expansion of the semimembranosus. It resists internal rotation and extension, and it's a secondary stabilizer in full extension. And if you have when it flexes, it slackens. All right. So really, it's this internal rotation and resistance it's internal rotator and resistance to posterior instability. So you're going to see a posterior oblique in the setting of a PCL injury. You can see a hyperextension or posterior medial rotatory instability. So this is just something I make my residents look at, my fellows look at. This is something that Laprade's published, just anatomic references to be used in the operating room. And I'm always using radiography when I'm doing these cases to really get the location of the MCL. We've published on this as well, roughly in line with the posterior margin of the femur. As it hits Blumenstedt's line, you'll be in the general area of the superficial MCL. And the superficial MCL is actually a rather broad origin. And so really to get the isometric point, because there's different bands, you're really going to put that graft more on the epicondyle, so a little bit more anterior than really kind of that posterior to the that's been described by Dr. Laprade. If you look at Dr. Amos looked at the rotation these different rotation contributions to the MCL and the deep MCL, it's really this short graft, either double-stranded or single, that really is really effective at stopping valgus and an external rotation moment. The longer grafts weren't stopping external rotation. The classic reconstruction was not. And so if we look at the clinical examination, this is going to be the key. At 30 degrees of flexion, if it opens, but it's firm at an extension, this is a superficial MCL. But if it's opening at full extension, then this is going to be a posterior medial corner, and likely this is a cruciate. And so really you have to make sure that you're holding the tibia reduced in the anterior posterior plane, because if the patient has an ACL and it's subluxing anteriorly, you could think that this is a posterior oblique when it's actually if the posterior medial corner is intact, when it's actually not. And so the dial test is not just for the posterior lateral corner, it's also used for the medial side of the knee as well. And it's just an external rotation test. It can be done prone or in supine position. And this is an example of an external anterior drawer test. And if you watch, the anterior medial joint is coming anteriorly, and this is anterior medial rotatory instability. So this is an ACL, and this is also a deep MCL. just as the last speaker said, always look for a ramp lesion, because a ramp lesion is going to not only lead to increased laxity in your anterior translation, but it's also going to lead to rotational laxity. This can also give you those rotational differences. As kind of a counterpoint, this is a posterior lateral drawer. So this is a PCL and a posterior lateral corner. So this is, as you watch, this is going posterior and lateral. It's not going anterior and medial. What's confusing is as a way we describe MCLs, the classic definition we use is a grade 1 tenderness over the superficial MCL, a grade 2 with no laxity, a grade 2 is pain diffusely, but laxity, but a firm endpoint, and a grade 3 is complete opening. If we look at Houston's system, this grading, whereas grade 1 is less than 5 millimeters, and grade 3 is greater than 10, and you compare that to the IKDC method of grade A is 0 to 2. And then we look at Laprod's stress testing of 3.2 millimeters equals a complete superficial MCL, and greater than 9.8 is a complete knee injury. This is going to lead to some confusion in the way that we report this, because you can see that a grade 1 is actually a complete deep and superficial MCL, and this would be a grade 1 in the Houston system and a grade B in the international classification. So the reporting on this is all over the place, and this really is what's leading to some inconsistencies in the literature. If we look at the lateral side of the knee, so if we look at the anatomy, it's the lateral collateral ligament or the fibular collateral ligament, the popliteal fibular ligament, and the popliteus tendon. And these are going to provide, the LCL really is going to provide stability to varus. And you can find the LCL by opening up the bicep bursa. And this is a really easy way to do it. And then I tag this during the case, and I can pull on it to identify the origin. And if we want to identify the popliteus tendon, the popliteus sulcus is a great landmark intraoperatively because it's in the anterior fifth of the popliteus sulcus. And so it's the popliteus and is a static stability to external rotation in varus. And really the popliteal fibular and the popliteus are the stabilizers to external rotation, but the LCL is the main resistance to varus restraint. But these work critically with the ACL and the PCL to give these interactions. So this is what we always have to look for when we have an ACL or PCL injury. We always have to look for a rotational laxity. And so again, Laprod has contributed enormously to the literature on this in both with the radiographic landmarks, which I find extremely helpful. And then wherever we're going to compare, we're always going to compare to the contralateral extremity. And so when we do the dial test at 30 degrees, which is positive if it's greater than 10 to 15 degrees, and if the dial test is positive at 90 degrees, this is going to signify a posterior cruciate ligament as well as a posterior lateral corner. I'm always using stress tests in the operating room to look at the opposite side and compare. Laprod's reported that 2.7 millimeters is consistent with an LCL. Now, it's hard to get 2.7. It's really somewhat of a qualitative instead of a quantitative examination. If it's greater than 4 millimeters, you get a posterior lateral corner as well at 30 degrees. And so I'm always testing in the operating room on these cases. And really, if you're opening up in full extension, when you're varus stress testing, not only is your posterior lateral corner involved, but you really have to look, is there a cruciate involved? This causing that to happen. So you really got to look closely at this. And if you're getting hyperextension on the hyperextension, and you're going to have, not only are you going to have a varus laxity, but you also have to look at something like this. It doesn't happen unless you're going to get a cruciate. So usually this is going to involve the posterior cruciate. So when I do the workup for this, it's really a general physical examination in the clinic. I look at the MRIs, and this gives me an idea to what's been injured, but it's really under anesthesia that I'm fluoroscopically comparing this to the contralateral extremity. And this is where the definite surgical decision-making occurs based on what it looks like in when it's compared to the contralateral extremity. So I'm in favor, and I'll talk about this a little later, I'm in favor of using a single tail anatomic reconstruction, which is essentially a Laprod reconstruction with one single graft limb. So for the take-home points, we really have to understand and restore anatomy. The biomechanics is what we're after, and really looking at the clinical examination when the patient's asleep in the operating room. The MRI gives us an idea of what's been injured, but it's really what the patient shows when they're under anesthesia, and we're comparing this. And The decision to do a collateral reconstruction or repair is going to be made after, before the cruciate's done. Once the cruciate's done, that's going to blunt that examination. So, thank you.